So I'm going to do something a little different with this video. It's a discussion video, but it's one where I am replying to industry analyst Michael Pachter. Now, for those who don't know who Michael Pachter is and why I'm responding, hold on for a moment. It's going to make a lot of sense soon. Michael Pachter is a stock analyst. His job is actually to analyze the stock market and create a bunch of graphs and charts and long-winded explanations for investors to invest their money. He is paid for that work. It is work none of us have ever actually seen publicly. So if you're someone who knows who Michael Pachter is and you know him because of his gaming opinions and how wrong he's been at times and this and that and all that stuff, it doesn't really matter when it pertains to his actual job. Now, included in his stock portfolio are stocks like Nintendo and EA and Ubisoft and Microsoft and Sony. And this is how he became popularized in the gaming world, because he does analyze video game stocks, because those stocks are part of his portfolio that he suggests to buy or sell to investors that pay him for that information. Now, obviously, he's very good at his job because he's been doing it a long time, and people keep paying him to do it, and they wouldn't keep paying him to do it if they weren't making money off of his advice and his suggestions. Now, the reason we're talking about him in this video, the reason I'm replying to him, is because after game trailers went out, Michael Pachter kind of followed Shane Satterfield over to a place called Sifted Games. Now, Sifted Games is a completely 100% community-supported venture. In fact, most of their content is basically gated. You can't get it for free. But the Pachter Factor show, which replaced the old Pack Attack show at Game Trailers, is one of those shows you do get like a week or two after it's already been out to the Patreon backers of Sifted Games. And regardless of what you think of Shane Satterfield or Michael Pachter, I decided, I don't know, about a month back, to ask a question for the show. And I did this over the Google community post, or I should say the YouTube community post, that Shane Satterfield had put out, because he's never done this as far as I'm aware before. I've been following their channel with about 14,000 subs and their work ever since Game Trailers went under, just like I follow all of Easy Ally's work, and I love it. So I decided that since he put up a community post and it was a couple days and no one replied, that I would ask my question, because I figured, you know what, no one's replying. Maybe if I make a very well-rounded Nintendo-based question, it will get featured on the show. And lo and behold, I was correct. So yes, we're actually featured on the Pachter Factor show, which is awesome, and it's the first time I've ever been featured in a show like this. Now, here is the question and the response from Michael Pachter.
Next question from YouTube, from Nintendo Prime. What do you think Nintendo's strategy will be for Switch as we get closer and closer to PS5 and Xbox 2? Its market position works in the current climate, but I'm not sure it will continue to work in a couple of years when much more powerful hardware is available. Look, I think Nintendo is just out to lunch. I mean, I think they have no idea what they're doing. The software is great, and the marketing people are really great at doing what they can with the product they have. The Switch is way too late. What really happened is they completely whiffed on Wii U. And had the Switch come out when the Wii U came out, I think they would have been in the lead this cycle. It didn't. They launched the Switch way late, and it's priced too high. So the Switch costs the same as a PS4. And if you really only are going to get one console, why would you get a Switch over a PS4? Answer, you'll love Nintendo first-party titles. But short of that, no, you won't. I think you get it in addition to a PS4. But I don't think you get it instead of a PS4. You're not going to get to play all the games that you can. So I think they already blew it in this cycle. So when you talk about what's going to change, Nintendo is a backward-looking company. They manage by looking in the rearview mirror at their past success. Their immediately past CEO, Kimishima, committed to 20 million Switches this year. They are tracking to 8 million. They're missing by a mile. Their new CEO, who started at the end of May, Furukawa, I've never met the guy. We'll see what he says. But the fact is that it's priced too high to sell 20 million a year. The Wii sold 20 million a year and was priced at $199 and then $149. This thing needs to drop to $199 to have a prayer of selling those kind of numbers. And what's their strategy going to be? This is the company with the blue ocean, okay? Blue ocean means we're in our own ocean. There are no sharks. We can swim along. No one will attack us. We don't compete. This is a company that genuinely believes they don't compete with the other companies. And so as long as they think that, they don't care about PlayStation 5 and Xbox 2. Those aren't competitive. Those are different. If they believe that and they're right, then they aren't going to change their strategy. If they believe that and they're wrong, they'll figure out way too late that they're wrong, as they did with Wii U, and they'll come up with some new console around 3 years after the Xbox 2 and PlayStation 5 launch, just like they did with Switch. So Switch came out 4 years, 3.5 years after Xbox One and PS4. They'll figure it out way too late. I think they are just out to lunch. I do not think they have a strategy that works. Their software is great, and if you want it, you're going to play it on their hardware, but they're going to stay in the hardware business for a while because they are convinced that they're absolutely right. So, no, I don't think that their strategy is going to work when more powerful hardware is available. Not at $300. I mean, they're going to have to drop the price a lot.
All right, so there was Michael Pachter with his thought process and his reply to my question. Now, there's a lot of factual inaccuracies in what he said, which is partially why a lot of people do think he's an idiot. I don't think that Michael Pachter is an idiot. I just don't think that he believes in Nintendo for this cycle, even with Switch's meteoric success in its first year. He probably thinks it's not sustainable for a multitude of reasons, some of which he listed. Now, here's my thing. I'm going to reply to his points point by point because I disagree with a lot of it, and you can argue it's my bias for Nintendo. And that's fine if you think that's the case. Just hear me out and tell me what you guys think at the end of the video, because I really want to know your guys' thoughts on this as well as we continue this conversation on what, if anything, Nintendo is going to do in response or even before, potentially, the systems come out. So first off, he says Nintendo has no idea what they are doing. I think that's a bit of a misnomer. I think there is some truth to they don't know what they're doing in so much that they rushed Switch out the door without the online being ready, without a lot of systems in place being ready that have slowly started to get better and better as time has moved on. I think that because of that, Nintendo rushed the Switch out without really much of a plan. It was more so, let's just get this out there because Wii U is tanking. And what happened is a meteoric success, which has ultimately led to a bit of a slow reaction from Nintendo in trying to improve upon some of the base systems there. But I think Nintendo still kind of sort of knows what they're doing overall. They realized their 3DS is thriving, but not quite what it used to be in terms of their old school handheld sales. It is Wii U is bombing, but there's something there. There's a market there, and I think Michael Pachter doesn't touch on this at all in any of his response. That there is a market for a hybrid system of playing games on the go that you can also play on your TV. So that's what Nintendo's doing. Nintendo's going after that market. Now we can argue if it's blue ocean or whatever. I mean, it's obviously blue ocean in so much that as Michael Pachter says, they don't really think there's sharks in the water coming after them, but it's still that Nintendo's arguing they care about third-party support, and if they do, they kind of got to worry about what other companies are doing, at least a little bit. Now, moving on, he talks about how Switch is way too late, and I think that's agreeable in some respects, but disagreeable in others, because he talked about how if Switch had come out when instead of Wii U, when Wii U did, Switch would have been a runaway success. The problem is the technology to make Switch possible didn't exist. The Tegra X1 came out in 2015, so it didn't even exist until 2015, and at that time, you still would have needed some time for the pricing to come down to even have a Switch be $300. And that's another point he brings up, is that it's priced too high. Now, we can argue if they at least get rid of the dock, they could charge $250 probably. I mean, I would argue $200, but whatever. They would probably do $250 without the dock in there. But even then, that defeats the whole purpose of the system and it being called Switch and being able to, switch it from TV to on the go. So I don't see Nintendo doing that. So at the end of the day, I don't know that it's priced too high when you consider the technology inside of it. The Tegra X1, I know you see... basically, this is the way to compare the pricing when it comes to the Tegra X1. NVIDIA has devices out there with the Tegra X1 for portable form, and then they have devices out there with the Tegra X1 that's in a standalone TV kind of stick or box. The stick or box is usually ranging between $100 to $200. The portable is about $200 to $250. And Nintendo combines all that together into one system. You hit $300, and that's not including any sort of Nintendo tax and premiums and the internal storage and the cooling solutions and all that jazz, because the Tegra X1 a lot of times has been used in situations where it didn't have an active cooler unless it was in the TV, the little TV box thing. So And that's kind of my 2 cents. I don't think the Switch is overpriced for what's in it. It's overpriced in comparison to the rest of the industry when it comes to its performance. But that's like discounting the fact that it's the most powerful, dedicated video game handheld to ever exist. And when you just view it in the light of just a home console, I actually see where he's coming from. But and Nintendo's advertising it as a home console. But you can't forget the on-the-go aspect. Speaking of the on-the-go aspect, he did mention that the only reason to get a Switch over a PlayStation 4 is that you love Nintendo games. And I think there is some truth to that because all the third-party games are going to PlayStation 4. Most of the indie games, if not all of them, are also on, outside of exclusive ones, are also on PlayStation 4. And PlayStation 4 has a lot of great exclusive content. I personally think if you have time to sit in front of your TV and play games, that you should probably own a PlayStation 4. Nope. I mean, I have no qualms with that. But I don't think that's the only reason. I think there is a huge market of people that are buying Switch, or a growing market anyways, that are buying it for the portability factor to play indie games and Nintendo games and whatever AAA games are available on the go. And I feel like any person who doesn't have the time to sit in front of a TV to play a PlayStation 4 but still wants to game and wants console quality games could potentially be interested in Switch, and that's kind of shown by the age groups that have bought Switch. But yeah, I feel like that's missing the boat a little bit there, in that the only reasons for Nintendo games, and that was the only reason to buy a Wii U. That's not necessarily the only reason to buy a Switch. There's an appeal factor to the Switch that goes beyond just Nintendo games. Hence why we're seeing these massive sales of indie games, 250,000 in like a couple days for some of them. Like, it's insane. I'm actually curious what the sales for Overcooked 2 are. Like, the games are selling well on the system that aren't just Nintendo, and that's kind of being missed here in his analysis, which is fine because I think he's written off, especially after the quarterly report came out. Speaking of the quarterly report, he talked about how the prior CEO of Nintendo, or the guy running it, was Kimishima, and he said that 20 million Switches were projected for this fiscal year. Nintendo's only tracking for 8 million, and this actually got picked up by a few places, talking about, oh man, Michael Pachter really only thinks there's going to be 8 million Switches sold. The way he words it is kind of nonchalant, but he does talk about tracking. And what tracking does is just take known data and extrapolate it, for a set amount of time. And so what Michael Pachter did is look at the sales data of the first quarter, which was like 1.8 million Switches, round it to 2, extrapolate it for the next 3 quarters, you hit 8 million. Now it's more like 7.6, but whatever, he rounded up a little bit of benefit of the doubt to Nintendo to at least hit 2 million per quarter. The thing is obviously that's just an extrapolation of current data points. It doesn't take into consideration future data points, such as the release of Pokemon and Smash and the holiday season and sales, and the fact that obviously, even if in quarter 2, even if Octopath Traveler didn't ultimately lead to the Switch just blowing up in the second quarter, we know in quarter 3, we know during the holidays, Switch is going to move more than 2 million units. I mean, there's 2 massive games coming out for it that are going to, regardless of what you think of those games, are going to move units. You're going to see more than 2 million. And it's the holiday period where Nintendo sees more than 2 million units. Even for Wii U, they typically saw more than 2 million units during the holiday period. So, yeah, I think it's a little overblown to take that to heart. Again, this is one thing with statistics that's a lot of fun, is that you could basically take any sort of stat and infer from it what you want. He used the stat of extrapolation of tracking data, extrapolating quarter 1 for the rest of the year, and using that in a negative context. And also he mentions PlayStation 4 a lot because he probably thinks people should buy a PlayStation 4, and that's fine. But, I mean, if you want to do that kind of method, then the PlayStation 4 is only on track to sell 13 million this fiscal year, and yet I don't think he has any issue thinking that PlayStation 4, I think I actually, in some other answer in a prior video, he said he doesn't think PlayStation 4 have any issue hitting their 96 million. Well, that means he's using different data points, because he's projecting that PlayStation 4 is going to sell more when Spider-Man comes out, and Last of Us 2, and all that stuff, whereas he's not projecting that Switch is going to sell more because of Smash Bros. And Pokemon. So, again, this is the fun part of statistics. You can basically cherry-pick any stats you want to make any point you want to make. But yeah, obviously Switch is going to sell more than 8 million. I mean, they might sell 8 million alone in the third quarter, potentially. But that's obviously not a data point he's taken into consideration. Now, I do think 20 million is, at least based on what we currently know, what's currently coming out, might be a bit of a stretch. I don't know if Nintendo's going to hit it. I think they can hit the numbers they hit last quarter, which was, I believe, it was around 15 million, because you got to exclude the launch month sales in there. So I think it was around 15 million units they did last fiscal quarter. I think they can do that again. Whether or not they can surpass that, because you want to show growth in year 2, I don't know. That's the big mystery right now. But Nintendo keeps thinking, look, Pokemon and Smash are going to sell more copies than people are counting. So we'll see what happens. He also said that he believed Nintendo's banking on their blue ocean, that it won't matter. This is in direct response to my actual question, what anyone else does when it comes to their market share. And basically, if Nintendo's right about that, PlayStation 5 comes out, and Xbox 2 or Xbox Scarlet or Xbox Next, whatever they call it, it just won't affect Nintendo at all. Their market share is going to stay the same. It's going to stay vibrant. Things are going to continue to sell. This kind of sort of happened with Wii for a little while. But what I actually think is interesting here is when he talks about that, he says that if Nintendo is wrong, they'll react far too late. And he brings up Wii U. And I think Wii U is a very poor example because Wii U wasn't a late-to-the-party reaction. They didn't need to react to what was happening with Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 because Wii was already dominating during that exact same generation. What Wii U was a misfire. It was we're going to build off of that Wii brand and make a HD twin style, because we called them the HD twins back then, an HD twin style system way too late. And I don't think it was a reaction to the HD twins. I think it was more of they didn't really consider that a PlayStation 4 and Xbox, Xbox One, we're going to be dropping, $400, $500 eventually back down to $400 for Xbox One. Like, they didn't even consider that would be possible. So when they launched Wii U, like the black 32 gig version had, at the price point they did of $350. And then you have PlayStation 4, significantly more powerful, coming out at $400 with a hell of a lot more storage. It's kind of like, yeah, Nintendo, you misfired. You didn't consider the competition. And that's basically what Michael Pachter says. They never consider the competition. That's not true. They've considered the competition over the years. In fact, the competition is exactly what led to them doing Wii in the first place. They were like, you know what? We're tired of trying to fight the same battle as our competitors, so we're just going to do our own thing. Now, he brings up a point about how if they want to hit 20 million Switches, you have to look at what the Wii did. And he talks about how the Wii hit 20 million, but it launched at $199. That's not true. The Wii launched at $250, and then price dropped to $200. Literally, 3 years later, it held at $250. All of the peak years of Wii, where it sold more than half, 60, 70 million of its stock, was at the launch price of $250. They did not drop the price on that Wii until, 2010? They had already had 3 or 4 full years of $250 launch price. So he's a little off on that front. But whatever. I mean, I get his point was that it was still cheaper than Switch, right? It was still cheaper than Switch, and it was easier to argue that blue ocean strategy because you're looking at, $250 versus, $400, $500, $600 when PlayStation 3 launched, and then obviously, the $300, $350, $400 range that Xbox 360 was in. So it felt like a value, whereas Switch's price, yeah, he's right. It matches PlayStation 4 today. And, PlayStation 4 is probably going to be cheaper than Switch this holiday, and that's a thing that Nintendo has got to worry about a little bit too. And it's something that I don't see the direct correlation, because if Nintendo's in their own ocean, then it doesn't really matter what anyone else is doing. But if it matters what other people are doing, then Nintendo's not in their own ocean. Well, what is it? Which way are you leaning there, Pachter? I don't really get it. I want to have this conversation with you, and I feel like if we sat down in a room together, we could actually have a very nice conversation. And I'm actually curious what your opinion would be if I corrected you on your facts, and then saw what, wait, are you sure about that? And then I'd show him, yeah, here's the stats, and he'd be like, okay, well, okay. I mean, I think we could have a nice statistic-based debate. Anyways, he ends by basically saying Nintendo software is great, which, I mean, he's said that for years, and obviously Nintendo software is great, but he says Nintendo's out to lunch, and they don't have any sort of plans to combat PlayStation 5 and Xbox 2. And on that front, I kind of sort of agree. I don't think Nintendo's interested at all at going head-to-head. If they were, they would be doing it now. I think that Nintendo is going to respond, but their response isn't going to be what people want it to be. I'm talking, incremental, improvements every 3 years, a new Switch that's slightly better than the old Switch, kind of like what phones are like every year. And I think that that's an okay strategy and will work well for Nintendo. I don't know if they're going to continue to get AAA third-party support when PlayStation 5 lands, but then again, who knows? Maybe PlayStation 5 screws the pooch, just like Sony kind of did at the beginning of the PlayStation 3 era. Maybe Xbox screws the pooch too, and everyone turns to Nintendo. Reality is, we don't know what's going to happen. But I'm very interested in your guys' thoughts on this in the comments below. Is Nintendo going to respond at all? What are they going to do? What do you think about what Pachter said? What do you think about what I just said? Let's continue this conversation. All right, folks. I'll catch you in the next one.